Right, this is day 2 of recording myself in front of my camera. I think I got my shit together. I know what I want to talk about, and also after watching my video yesterday, I realized that it's a lot better to look at the camera and give a sense of personality and be a little bit more aware of what I'm doing with my body language. I think it's a lot more presentable that way. I mean, I should know about presentability. I was a public speaking champion at one point in my life. Right, back to the topic at hand, science. Again, this is very impromptu. I have not made a script for this. I'm just ranting out of my ass. But, science. So I was like having a brain fart, again, as you do today. And one of the things I was thinking about was how some sciences are not the same as other sciences. And I'm thinking specifically about the physical sciences and the divide that it has with the life sciences, which is of course what I did. And I do think like not all sciences are the same, at least in terms of like the ontological commitments that it makes about the world and reality. One of the chief differences that separate the life sciences from the physical sciences of physics and chemistry is that life reproduces. Life, the thing that biologists, epidemiologists, biomedical scientists study, has purpose. It has telos. And this is something that's lost in many like positivistic treatments of science, where science is presupposed to not have any values. You're not studying anything that could have value or could move towards an end. And I think this is wrong, at least when applied to a life science or like a biological science. This might not be as strictly observed, or like this might not apply to like physical sciences such as physics or chemistry, but I think this is something that has really been bugging me ever since I did my undergraduate course in biomedical sciences, and all the modules that came with it. You know, like I did several modules. The ones that are really quite memorable for me are oncology, so cancer cell, immunology, epidemiology, pharmacology. I did a little bit of like drug design as well, and neuroscience, of course, as well as a little bit of evolutionary genetics, but mainly there was a lot of like molecular genetics that was part of my syllabus. So those are like the credentials, if you will, of what I studied back in the day when I was doing an undergrad in science. And one thing that always captivated me about all this like biomedical stuff were the debates that people were having about gender, and how gender was very intimately tied to like pathology and pathologization. And that's something you don't normally see in like a quote-unquote hard science. Hard sciences stereotypically being ones that don't have any values, you know, presupposedly. They are free of value. They're what you would say is value free. And here in some sciences, ones that were dealing with notions such as health, normality, and their counterparts, pathology and abnormality. Shabby, don't do that! Sorry, my dog is just like doing a bad. Anyway, where was I? Girl, you will be the death of me. Anyway, good and bad, which are notions that most of the sciences don't have to deal with, right? There's this implicit idea of normativity in the biological sciences, or any kind of science that deals with entities that are capable of self-replication and therefore have some kind of end or purpose or telos or conation in the world that basically what I'm saying is they can want. Like living things can want by virtue of their self-replicative abilities. Something that an inanimate object such as a rock or like a chemical compound could never hope to achieve, or to be like, there's no point in modeling inanimate objects, physical objects, with the idea of like intentionality behind it. Of course, like amoeba don't have intention. Intention is like a very higher, very complex form of wanting, but it can be said in a very minimal sense that organisms want to persist in living. And if that's too wooey for you, then maybe like the contrived term like conating might be a little bit more amenable to one's ears. So this is why like I sometimes delve in jargon, but I think it's perfectly non-superstitious, perfectly like normal to say that an amoeba wants to persist in whatever it's doing, amoeba-ing. Sorry, my dog's just coming up to me right now. And dogs also want to do things. We're not the only ones, and by we I mean humans. We are not the only ones who are capable of wanting and intending and having like these very complex conative states. Animals certainly have them, especially like the higher mammals. I'm very certain of that. Dogs certainly also have them. But as you go down the ladder of like the hierarchy of life, you still find like some very rudimentary form of like conation, in the form of like amoeba, for example. They want to reproduce. So where am I going with this? Okay, so the notion that wanting is applicable to living matter in a way that is not applicable to non-living matter is important, because you can have good wanting as well as miswanting. You can have normal wanting as well as bad wanting, abnormal wanting. And this introduces like the idea of normativity. You can have good and bad. You can have miswanting and correct wanting. And this has implications because now you make possible the idea of pathologies, where you can have hyper or hypo action of any given behavior that the living organism is capable of doing. So organisms modeled as like agents are capable of action, and the actions that they do are dependent on their conation. They conate to do something, and if they fail to achieve like their telos, if they fail to achieve their purpose, in other words, then they have done a bad. Whereas if they have achieved their telos, if they've achieved the aims that they were set out for, be it what they may, then they have done a good. And so here you find like this really unique notion that is completely irreducible in biology to like the chemical sciences. 1 second, let's do a little. God, girl, she punched me. You are jumpy today, aren't you? Boo, boo. Look at her conating. Look at her jumping and wanting. You're kind of miswanting at the moment, but she's doing a good. Look at her. Look, she's living out her telos. That's her. Oh God. And that's a dog living out its telos. That's so funny. Okay, that's enough dog permission for now. Back to where I was going. Where was I going with that idea? Okay, so like biology has normativity baked into it because of its self-replication abilities in a way that rocks will never have, in the way that the forces that bind the universe together will never have. And so our models of those things, of like non-living matter as well as like energy, don't necessarily apply to entities that have telos, that have purpose, that have conation abilities, because they don't have to fulfill purpose, whereas living things do. And if a living thing fails to fulfill the most basic purpose of a living thing, which is to continue on living, then it dies and becomes like the rest of non-living matter. Then it becomes physics, then it becomes chemistry. But if it persists in its life processes, if it manages to achieve and attain its telos, then it goes on living and can strive towards more complicated forms of telos and create new purpose. And this is like an idea that used to be more prevalent in like Greek philosophy and Greek thinking. Aristotle especially spoke of the living world as having intrinsic telos to them. But somehow or another, as science like modernized, and I want to say that the fault is up to like the positivist for introducing this idea that science is all about mechanistic modeling, and the paradigm of science is physics, and everything should like conform to like the laws of nature in ways that do not recognize the agency intrinsic to agents, to their capacity for action. And because of that, we've kind of de-teleologized biology in a way that maybe like the ancients or the medieval, and I don't want to say scientists because that's like an anachronistic term, but thinkers of like the biological world may not have necessarily thought of. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like science is special. I'm still very much a scientist when it comes to these things, but what am I saying? Of course I'm a scientist. What I'm trying to say is that life sciences are special because they have teleology baked in to their ontology in a way that is irreducible. You cannot ignore it in the same way that you can ignore it in like, or not even have to like entertain it in chemistry or like physics. But biology, because of its like intrinsically teleological nature, needs to have purpose brought back in to like the ontological presuppositions we make about biological entities. Anyway, I think that's all for now. This is a lot more in depth. I don't know what this is gonna like come out as. I probably am not gonna like edit this, but yeah, this is me attempting to brain fart and just splurge my ideas because I'm approaching hitherto unknown levels of who gives a shit anymore, right? Yeah, my fuck it thresholds are like there, like bam. I'm just gonna talk. That should be enough. That's like 13 minutes. All right, bye.